Okay, are we ready?
Yep.
Camera on. Hello everybody out in YouTube land. Thank you for joining us, and also everybody who's listening in on ACIM Gather. Really happy that you're joining us. Please join us every Sunday, or if you're watching the YouTube videos, watch them all. If you click on subscribing to the channel, then you'll get notified every time we upload a new video, and there are weekly uploads, so watch them all. Okay, the title of my talk today is To Side with Freedom. So there's a lot going on in the United States right now with politics and freedom and the judicial system, and I thought I would address that just a little bit. Whenever you have a political discussion in a spiritual context, there's always this discussion that goes on underneath it about, well, should we even be involved with this kind of discussion? Isn't that being judgmental? If I decide that this side is right and this side is wrong, then I'm in judgment, and as a spiritual person, aren't we supposed to be not judging? So you hear this a lot. And some people really believe that being an A Course in Miracles student or a spiritual student means probably that you need to be apolitical. So I want to address that a little bit. The trouble with being apolitical, I believe, is that, especially with many of my liberal friends, and probably more of my friends actually are liberal than conservative, though I do have some conservative friends. I want to acknowledge my sister Sarah. She's about the most conservative person I know. And we are very loving and friendly. Actually, she's been a great help for me to understand the conservative point of view, because she champions it a lot. So a lot of my liberal friends are, I believe, tortured by the idea that I think is expressed in the next thing that I'm going to read. And I'm sure many of you will recognize this. We've heard it bantered around for many, many years. First they came for the socialists, but I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came from the trade unionists, but I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, but I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Now they came for me, and there is no one left to speak for me. So it's that idea that, okay, maybe I'm not Muslim, and maybe I don't live in one of those countries where the travel ban was in place. So it doesn't really affect me. And I guess I don't need to speak out, or maybe I do need to speak out, because like the sentiment here in the saying, if I don't speak out at a time when freedoms seem to be taken away, then who's going to speak out for me when my freedoms get taken away? So, you know, we've got to grapple with that idea. And actually that famous thing I just read was written and spoken by a German man named, he was a Protestant minister, by the way, and his name was Martin Niemöller. And he was an outspoken critic of the Nazis. He was not Jewish, he was Protestant, but because he was an outspoken critic of the Nazis, he spent 7 years in concentration camps during the war. But he got out of the concentration camps and then continued to be an outspoken person for human rights, and that was when he said that thing. And he used to apologize and to Jewish people that he didn't do enough during up to the war to help them, and that his religion, the Protestants, didn't do enough. So, as I said, my liberal friends are sort of haunted with that sentiment that shouldn't we be doing something? Isn't there something here that is called for? Shouldn't we be fighting for this freedom in some way? So let's just do a quick review, because I know a lot of people don't pay attention to politics, and actually I didn't want to pay much attention to it after the election either. But let's talk about the travel ban. So first of all, on January 20th, President Trump was inaugurated as president. Exactly a week later, on the 27th, President Trump put a travel ban out there, which blocked travel for people coming into this country from 7 countries that were predominantly Muslim. And that included everybody from those countries, even people who had legal green cards. So if you had a green card, you were from one of these countries and you were outside the country and you wanted to come back into here where your home was, and you had a green card, according to the travel ban, you couldn't come in, because there was a ban on travel from people from those countries. So it included everybody. However, the very next day, a federal judge in New York City issued an emergency stay on that executive order, and it stopped the deportation of travelers who had valid visas. And then the very next day after that, the Homeland Security Secretary, John Kelly, issued a waiver so that the travel ban didn't apply to any lawful residents, so then the green card people could then travel. And then the very next day, on January 30th, the state of Washington sued the Trump administration in federal court. I didn't even know it was possible to sue the administration, but apparently it is. So on January 30th, the state of Washington sued the Trump administration. And the very next day there were more lawsuits. There were 4 additional states that have now sued. There's multiple individuals who have sued. And as of February 10th, there are now 20 different lawsuits working their way through the courts. On February 3rd, the Washington State District Court suspended the entire ban nationwide with a temporary restraining order, and then travel could then resume. The very next day, on February 4th, the Justice Department, part of the Trump administration, asked the Federal Appeals Court for an emergency ruling to overturn the Washington ban. The request was denied, and the court asked for information. They wanted both sides to prepare a brief and present it to them. 3 days later, on February 3rd, notice how fast this is all moving? You think about the courts, nothing moves. This moves really fast. On February 7th, there was a public hearing of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, what do we know about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals? It's right here in San Francisco! Woohoo! It's on 7th Street, in between Market Mission. It's right there. You go look at it. So the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard the arguments from the federal government and from the state of Washington, and 2 days later, on February 9th, they put forth their decision. The government lost the appeal. And it stated that the government provided no proof that travel was in some way a threat to the country. And without that, the government lost its appeal. And then when the government knew that it had lost its appeal, President Trump tweeted, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake." So that's the history of the travel ban right now. You don't really know what's going to happen. They could possibly appeal it, take it to the Supreme Court. Remember, the Supreme Court does not have to take the case. The Supreme Court takes cases by their whim, actually, or just have their guidance, let's say. So they are not obligated to take cases that have presented to them. So that people don't know whether, even if it goes to the Supreme Court, whether the Supreme Court would pick up the case. Some people think it wouldn't, because of the precedent from the courts that have preceded it. And some people think that maybe President Trump will issue a new ban that has more likelihood of going through. So we don't know. So the freedom to travel and the freedom of free access around the world to people, that's what's sort of up right now. Is this something that we should stand up for? Is this something that we should fight for? Or is being an A Course in Miracles student just an apolitical thing, and we just step away from those kinds of controversies? And then in the back of our minds, it's, well, I'm not Muslim or from those countries, so I guess it doesn't really affect me anyway. So it's all of those questions. And that, if you look at the reading that's in your program, and I ask you all to take that home and look at it, because it's a great reading. It says, you have heard many arguments on behalf of the freedoms, which would indeed have been freedom if man had not chosen to fight for them. Yet the argument that underlies the defense of freedom is perfectly valid. Because it is true, it should not be fought for, but it should be sided with. It's the fighting that's a problem. It's when you make the other side bad and guilty, and like they've done something that they should be punished for, you're going to fight it. That's a problem, because that's separation. That's us and them. They're bad, they're different from me, I have a different point of view. That's what we have to watch out for as spiritual students. However, that doesn't mean that we don't stand up for freedom. That doesn't mean that we don't have a point of view. That doesn't mean that we make sure that our energy goes into the side of those with freedom. And it's important to do that. So we don't fight if it's wrong, but we side with what's right. And being a spiritual student doesn't mean that we let go of right and wrong. It means that we let go of good and bad. And there's a real difference between right and wrong and good and bad. Right and wrong is still what we're supposed to do. Good and bad, especially bad in the terms like they should be guilty and they should be punished. That's what is really a problem. One of the things that I've tried to do, that I've been guided to do since Mr. Trump got elected president, is to really suspend my judgment of things and listen to the other side of the view. And I have to thank my sister Sarah, actually, because she represents that other point of view. And I love her, and I want to hear her. So when I talk with her, I just put my beliefs on hold and just really try to listen to what she's saying. And that's one thing that this election and the results has done. It's given that other side that I probably wanted to dismiss a real mouthpiece. And now they have our ear, and they can talk, and my sister talks. And there is a concern in them that the country isn't secure. And it needs to be defended against people that come here to do us harm. And there is a belief that something like the travel ban is actually a good thing. And you have to be open to hearing that. We're supposed to have open minds, and open minds mean that at certain times we have to put our beliefs on the shelf and open ourselves up to what somebody else is saying enough so that we can grok it and understand their logic and feeling about it, and play the game as, well, what if that was the truth? What if that was the truth? And if we just be open-minded enough to hear that, then we can pick up our beliefs right afterwards. Doesn't matter. But then we have a conversation going on, and I have made a pledge to myself to do that. I want, on my honor, I will do that. That's my promise to myself, but my promise to the other side too. I will hear you. I will listen to you. I will understand what it is that you're thinking, because I want to be in dialogue and I want to be in relationship, and I'm really in relationship with myself when I do that. Not necessarily the other, but the other is a representation of myself. And I pledge to do that, on my honor, on my honor. No force except your own will is strong enough or worthy enough to guide you. In this you are as free as God, and must remain so forever. You can never be bound except in honor. So that's my honor statement to myself, and I want to bind myself to that, because I want a conversation going on. I want to side with the freedoms, but siding with the freedoms means I have to have an open mind to be able to talk to the people who have the other point of view. So that leads to the question, well, how do we define freedom, and how do we define, let's say, human rights? And actually, we don't have to define human rights, because the United Nations did that really effectively on December 10th in 1948. It was one of the very first big things of the United Nations. They came up with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And actually, it's an amazing, amazing document. There are 30 articles in there that talks about the basic rights that every human being all over the planet should have. And I was told, I did a little research on this, that the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the most translated document in the world. It's been translated to every language in the world. And though you think you might not know it, if you've ever listened to the U2 song, Miss Sarajevo, they always have usually a European woman, probably an Eastern European woman, to recite certain passages of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Miss Sarajevo is a great song. So I'm just going to read, you can't read all 30 of them, they're kind of long. Article 2 was, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. That's Article 2. Article 3, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Article 4, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all of their forms. Article 5, no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 6, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. So these 30 things are really amazing. The United Nations did a terrific job. Now these are ideals and we are aspiring to them, but by any great calculation, we've made great strides to move towards these human rights, these freedoms, and those are definitely the freedoms that I want to side with. I'm going to read one more, Article 13. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country. So this sort of, goes up against the travel ban that we have just been talking about. So, as I said, since the election, I've really tried to have an open mind and listen. But that does not mean that I don't have my opinions, and it does not mean that I don't have my judgments. I have discernment. I like to call it discernment. I can discern what feels right and wrong. And I think a lot of the study of A Course in Miracles is about that discernment. It says we have to understand when we're right-minded or wrong-minded. This idea that right and wrong is a judgment that we shouldn't be involved with is not what A Course in Miracles teaches. A Course in Miracles teaches we shouldn't be involved with the critical judgment of good or bad, not right or wrong. We still get involved with right or wrong. And I know personally, I want to stand up on the side of what I believe to be right, and what I believe to be right are the freedoms that every human being has, and the thing by the United Nations is as good a statement of those freedoms as anyone can come up with. I understand that famous quotation that I read at the beginning by the German pastor, Martin Niemöller. I think it's amazing. And you notice that he talks about speaking out. He never talked about fighting. He talked about when they came for those people, I didn't speak out. And now there's no one left to speak out for me. So I think if we feel guided, we can definitely speak out. But when we speak out, we have to understand that people are going to speak back to us. And when they speak back to us, we have to have an open enough mind to hear them. And that goes right to the last quote that's in the program. And again, I advise you all to, I just recommend you all take the program home and look at that reading. It says, those who are against freedom, maybe some people who are in favor of the travel ban, believe that its outcome will hurt them, which cannot be true. But those who are for freedom, even if they are misguided in how they defend it, are siding with the one thing in this world which is true. Whenever anyone can listen fairly to both sides of any issue, he will make the right decision. This is because he has the answer. Conflict can seem to be interpersonal, but it must be intrapersonal first. So this conflict that we seem to have with other people who have a different point of view, it seems to be between different people. But what this is saying, that even though that's the way it seems, it's actually an intrapersonal conflict. And intrapersonal means within your person, within your own mind, within the person's mind. The conflict in the person's mind is where it starts. It's then projected out there in the world, and then it seems to be interpersonal. So we need to remember that these people that have another point of view are us. And we want to listen to us the same way that we want to be listened to. And if we have that open mind, as it says here, we will always make the right decision on which side to stand. So I'm definitely standing with freedom. I believe in the freedom to travel, and I'm not much of a traveler myself. But I do believe in the freedom to travel. But I want to hear what they have to say. And they have fears about terrorist activity, and that's valid. Compared, seeing what's going on in the world. But I want to understand that even though it appears to be an interpersonal conflict, it's actually an personal conflict. It starts within my own mind. So I have listened and I have heard even President Trump. I have seen President Trump. He is us. That's my talk for today. Thank you.